morning, everybody. It looks like attendees are steadily flowing in. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off now. Welcome, everyone, to Mornings with Planning, a webinar series hosted the first Wednesday of every month, where the Lexington Division of Planning discusses new ways to reconnect, reimagine, and respond in a new reality. These webinars are held live and recorded for later viewing. Today's webinar is eligible for AICP credit, as was January's webinar on infill and redevelopment. Today, we will be discussing fundamental human needs like food, housing, safety, and access to basic services. My name is Lauren Weaver, GISP and Senior Planner with the Lexington Division of Planning, but I will not be your moderator for today's March 3rd, 2021 session. So kick back with your morning coffee or tea, and let's meet our guest moderator for today, Commissioner Chris Ford. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. Commissioner Ford is Lexington's Commissioner for Social Services, a department comprised of social work and human services professionals addressing important services for aging, disabilities, families, and youth, with focuses ranging from hunger to opioid misuse. He previously represented the 1st Council District as a council member. He holds a Master's of Public Administration and has received many awards for his leadership in community engagement, public service, and much more. Commissioner Ford, thank you so much for serving as our moderator today and for your work in the Lexington community. As I hand it off to you, perhaps you can give people an overview of your role and what's going on in Lexington.
Well, thank you, Lauren, and good morning, everyone. I am definitely delighted to be here and excited about the conversation that we'll have with our panelists this morning. As Lauren mentioned, I'm fortunate to serve as Commissioner of Social Services in the administration of Mayor Linda Gordon here at City Hall. And we have an outstanding team in social services, roughly 120 full-time employees. Maybe a third of those are social workers. And we like to say we provide services from the cradle to the rocking chair. We're very fortunate to have many community partnerships with the nonprofit community here in Lexington, and also some of our institutional partners, such as Fayette County Public Schools, our local court system, and the Fayette County Health Department. We're also very fortunate to lead a grant program that provides support to our community organizations and nonprofits. Here recently, we've had the good fortune to work very closely to Mayor Gordon's Commission on Racial Justice and Equality. We're excited that March is National Social Work Month, and our theme, I believe, this year is Social Workers Are Essential. And then also March is Women's History Month, and I have the distinguished to be here. I have the opportunity to be here with a distinguished panel of women leaders in community and human services. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel this morning. We have Heather Dieffenbach, Executive Director of the Lexington Public Library, Sharon Price, Executive Director of the Community Action Council, Christine Smith, Executive Director of Seedleaf, and last but not least, Lauren Weaver, who serves as a long-range senior planner here in Urban County government. So ladies, again, thank you for joining us this morning, and let's go ahead and kick off the conversation. If you will, let's have just an icebreaker. If you will describe or introduce and to some and reintroduce your agency, the work that your agency and your team does, and also share kind of what guided your pathway to this important community work. We'll start off with Heather.
Good morning. So how did I get into my career path? My mother was a library director, and I actually have 5 librarians in my family. So I really literally grew up in the public library, going to work with my mom and working alongside her. So I was really able to see the difference that the public library could make in the lives of the community, the people in the community. And when I talk about what our organization does, kind of the first thing I think of when I think of the public library is that it's a place where anybody, you can come and learn anything you want, any way you want to. We have, of course, our books. That's the first thing that everybody thinks of, but we also have classes that people can take. We have meeting rooms that you can use to collaborate with other people. We're involved, like you said, from cradle to rocking chair. We have services for people throughout any phase of their life. And we really work to connect not just people throughout the community, but organizations throughout the community.
Thank you, Heather. We're glad to have you here this morning, joining the conversation. Next, we'll hear from Sharon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm representing Community Action Council. I'm the executive director here. And at Community Action Council, our mission is to prevent, reduce, and eliminate poverty. And so that's a big deal, right? And it crosses over all kinds of different grounds and barriers and spectrums and things like that. But one of our biggest focuses and one of our key elements of what it is that we do here was never more prevalent than it has been over the past year. And that is our ability to pivot and respond to the immediate needs of the community and what's happening in real time. And so just like you guys indicated as well, having community partnerships and being able to make those referrals and connections to other organizations for people is really the core of what we do. Now, we do a lot of things, but in a nutshell, that's what we do. But I'm gonna go back and Heather, I'm kind of like you. My upbringing and my family is kind of what guided me to this work. Because my family has always been a giving family and supportive. And, you know, I grew up in a very small community where everybody helped each other. And so that was from a very early age, that was one of the things that was instilled in me. And then, you know, just along my path, my work professional life, working with the Head Start program for over 25 years, working with families and children to be better tomorrow than they are today, and to be in a better place, in a different place. And, you know, that's what brought me to this position, strengthening the community for everybody and working alongside all of the amazing partners and organizations that are in the community. And we have a close relationship with the city where we try to align the work that we're doing with the work that the city is doing to have a bigger, bolder impact for everyone in the community, strengthening the community for everyone. That's what we do.
Thank you, Sharon. And again, we're glad you're here as well. Christine, tell us a little bit about Seedleaf and a little bit about your interest and your background.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My name's Christine Smith. I'm the executive director of Seedleaf. We are a community gardening organization here in Lexington that has been in existence since 2007. We have about 12 growing spaces that is open to the public, either to rent plots in to grow their own food or to come and pick food that is freely available March through October. In addition to our garden spaces, we provide classes and resources so that anyone, no matter your age or situation, can get involved in gardening and or access fresh, nutrient-rich produce. So we do quite a bit of education work with youth. We have 2 youth programs with middle schoolers and high schoolers to get them the skills and knowledge needed to, if not become gardeners and farmers themselves, to at least go out into the world having that skill set so that they can continue to do that throughout their lives. A little bit about how I came to this, and to be brief. So one, I grew up with gardeners in my family, and so it was just something very natural for me to do. I suppose in life, it was something that I've just always known and have been involved with. And previously, in like my previous career, I did a lot of work with violence, researching violence, whether that was violence around drugs or violence coming from, you know, different situations that people encounter within urban environments. And after doing that for a while, I decided that, you know, I just wanted to have a career where I could focus on creating beauty and defiance of what I studied and saw for so long. So really the thing that brought me here is just a desire to no longer sort of focus exclusively on the ills and the problems that we often see in communities here and abroad, but to think about ways of creating spaces of beauty and sustenance, and in spite of the violence and the difficulties that many people face, particularly low-income folks face. And so that's how I got here.
Thank you, Christine. And again, we welcome you to our panel. And last but not least, Lauren.
Hey, everybody. You know me perhaps from moderation on previous ones, and I'm absolutely honored to join this incredible panel on this particular webinar. I'll start with a little bit of background. I think similar to other backgrounds we've heard, my mother is largely responsible for my path. My mom is a special ed teacher, a very talented, compassionate special ed teacher that found herself exclusively supporting a family of 6 due to unexpected disability. And if you've ever tried to support a family of 6 on a teacher's income, it's really hard. And she's incredible. But with that, we definitely benefited from a lot of social services. I have many memories from very young ages of spending lots of times in the library and checking out books and reading all kinds of stuff. My family benefited from Head Start, and I owe a lot of where I've come today to my background. And so I feel a compulsion to return that. So I went to school for applied geography. I am an applied geographer, and was attracted to work in the planning division where I am now because of the impact that I believe planning can have on the larger community. Specifically, I'm on the long range planning team. So we do things like create the comprehensive plan that seeks to guide development into the future and looks at the long range goals of where we are and where we need to be. A lot of those have been just further emphasized by the shared reality we've had over the last year, problems that we've known existed and have only been exacerbated, and a little bit more push put in to move things forward. So I think that's a good background there. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Lauren. And again, I hope our viewing audience can recognize that we have a lot of expertise that reflects not only what the agencies represented here today provide, but the greater network of community organizations. And so let's jump into our questions and look forward to a very good discussion over the next 40 to 45 minutes. Our focus this morning is planning for basic human needs during the pandemic. And as we're in the first week of March, it's been a tough year for many. And I think our organizations are providing services perhaps in ways that we perhaps would have never envisioned. We want to touch on a few questions that have been submitted in the registration process. And if there are other questions that the viewing guests want to provide, we have a team working hard behind the scenes to make sure we incorporate that into our discussion. But let's just jump into a few questions. I'll begin with Sharon. Sharon, Community Action Council is known to be a leader in early childhood development, and particularly Head Start, as you mentioned. I'm fortunate to be a Head Start kid myself from Tallahassee, Florida. But CAC is also playing a critical role in helping ensure that low-income residents remain housed during the pandemic. The safest place we can be to avoid the spread of the virus has been close to home. Tell us a little bit more about the council's efforts in that regards, to housing instability.
Great, Chris. That has been one of the largest needs that we've seen over the last year. And so one of the themes that that's going to be shared here today is community collaborations. And so we're right now working with LFUCG on housing stabilization efforts, because as Chris indicated, the safest place that people can be is in their homes. And outside of that being safe in your home, we want families to be stable. We want children to be stable. And we know that there's a lot going on. The last year has provided so many different challenges that the more families in Fayette County that we can keep stable and situated in their homes, the better it's going to be for us. And so through this, and for the city as well, and through this collaboration with the city of Lexington, we're working with the housing stabilization efforts. And so what does this mean? This means that we are helping people who have lost their jobs, who have had a loss in income and revenue coming into their home, or who have had other significant issues that they've been facing because of the coronavirus pandemic, to stay stable. And so if they residents have found themselves where they are behind on their rental assistance or their utilities or anything like that, any of those necessary components that would affect someone's stable housing, we have been working and providing support, financial support for those families to stay in their homes. And I'll just go ahead and make a shameless pitch here, if we will, because I'm hoping that this is going to be about helping people in the community, right? So the easiest way to get help if you find yourself in need of being with some support, and it's okay for people to need support. We are all in a different time than we've ever been before in our lives. So if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. And so the best way to apply for this is to go to the website. It's COVID-19rentershelp.org. Submit your application. It's a one-page application. It's going to ask you some general questions, and then it'll go into the computer system and someone will call you. I promise. It may seem like it may take a little bit of time for someone to get back with you, but we are navigating because the need is so great in the community. Everything is being prioritized. And so, if you need some help, fill out that application. It's very easy. And I promise you that once, the prioritization list is made, somebody from my team is going to call you and walk you through the rest of the application and help you with that.
Well, thank you, Sharon. And we're very, very thankful here at City Hall to have a partner such as Community Action Council. A basic human need is housing and shelter. And we know that Lexington planning has shown us, Lauren, that affordable housing remains a challenge in Lexington pre-pandemic. And the COVID pandemic has only exacerbated the housing challenges and affordability. But just so our viewing audience will know, is that in the last year or so, we've provided up to $2 million in rental assistance, particularly for this COVID impact. And just recently, we've been awarded $9.6 million in federal funding. And a large portion of that is what Sharon is describing in regards to rental assistance. So we really appreciate having your support and help with that. And moving from a basic need of housing, food insecurity is another challenge that our community has had and continues to have during the pandemic. So I'll turn to Christine. Even pre-pandemic, many of our underserved communities lacked access to affordable, fresh, and nutritious food options. Why do you believe it's important to invest in local food systems and to build infrastructure in this market?
Yeah, so absolutely. We all have to eat, Chris, and sort of, fundamentally at the end of the day, even if we don't have housing or, ability to pay our bills, we still need to eat to be able to survive. So it is absolutely a fundamental human right. And, what Seedleaf does, we partner with organizations like Food Chain, partnership is the theme of today's conversation, like Food Chain, like Lean, to help our neighbors get access to, emergency food assistance. But we also believe that people need to have the means to grow their own. People need to have the means at the end of the day, even if they can't get to a food bank or to the grocery store, they can access something nearby that they have grown or have access to for their meals. And so what we try to do is to make sure that people know about the full range of resources in their community. We try to partner with those different groups to get a full range of resources to people, but we also really need to think about other ways in which people can sort of move toward self-sustainability, whether that's learning how to grow your own food or, knowing it and having the access to space to do that. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, truly, we all have to eat. And so our sort of approach is two-pronged, right? One of the things that we did in the past year, again, to address this issue of emergency food security, is that we partnered with Glean and Food Chain to offer a food fridge at the Nest. The Nest was also involved in this. It's a space where mothers and children can get resources, whether that's diapers, childcare, assistance with finding other social services that they need. We partnered with them to put a fridge on their site that has produce that comes from Whole Foods, Costco, from Food Chain, so that people have access to fresh food there. But in addition to that, one of the programs that we have ongoing and now is in its third year is our Market Garden program, where we work with residents who are above the age of 18. And we teach them growing practices, we teach them produce safety practices, and we invite them to come into our growing spaces and grow food for market. And so this year they'll be selling to different community markets like Woodhill, and hopefully the Castlewood Market. They sell to different local organizations. And so it's a way of bringing in income, but it's also a way of teaching that sustainability, that ability to grow your own. So even in the worst of circumstances, you do have access to your own creativity and skill to support yourself.
And Chris, if I may add to Christine, one of the things that I want to make sure that everybody in the community also knows is that if you need immediate, if you need food right now, God's Pantry has 4 different locations right here in Lexington. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. If you don't know what that number is, if you call Community Action, we'll be able to set up a referral for you. But they have 4 different locations, and Community Action actually operates the one on Cambridge Drive. And so I just wanted to make sure that people knew that if they needed food right now, that there's a way to get that right now.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
I'll tackle that just again. So yes, immediate food assistance, you know, reach out to Community Action Council, but also if you need seeds for your own growing space, we partnered with the public library this year to provide free seeds, about 10 different vegetable crops that are available through the library. So, I mean, gardening is something that can have a few costs at the beginning, but we want to make sure it's easy and accessible for everyone. So if you want access to seeds, this includes vegetables and flowers, going to your public library, pulling up and calling and requesting seeds is a possibility for everyone in Lexington.
Thank you. What I'm hearing a common theme that I already know really well, but I hope our audience also recognizes: collaborations and partnerships, resource sharing. And so I appreciate Christine and Sharon's comments. Heather, let's talk a little bit about connectivity. You know, in social and human services pre-pandemic, it's almost intrinsic for us to bring people together, to come and bring those resources. And the public library is a trusted space for folks in our community to come get information, to learn. And you and your team have grown to know a lot about the resources that are available. Talk to us a little bit about how you guys are adapting and providing services remotely and virtually over a time over the last few months where things were not as open as previously because of the healthcare concerns.
Yes, thank you. It's been very interesting. You know, the public library is a space that we value for its openness. We work to break down barriers between in accessing our services, and we, over the past year, had to work and put up literal barriers in our buildings and in our spaces. So we had to quickly, you know, do the buzzword of the past year, pivot, and find a way to make those services accessible to everyone without them coming into our buildings. So the first thing we were able to offer was our curbside service, so that people could come and get their books, they could get their DVDs, their physical materials. We also put a lot more of our collection budget into e-materials. We saw our ebooks, our e-audiobooks, of course, skyrocket over the past year. And, you know, that's been a bright spot in the pandemic, is that a lot of people who never used that service before have discovered it and really enjoyed it. Now, one of the hardest things to figure out was internet access, because you know, at a time when people couldn't safely come into the library and use our computers, the model that we had set up throughout the city, we had to figure out a way to be able to offer computers to people out in the community. So we purchased a collection of laptops and started circulating those. We have 240 laptops that you can check out from the public library. And then we recently added some internet hotspots. So if you don't have a computer at home, you don't have internet access, you can access both of those now through the public library in your own home. And I think that is important, not just during the pandemic, but going forward. I know as a working mom with 2 kids, it's not easy. If I didn't have a computer and internet access at home, it would be very difficult for me to come in after work and use a computer in the library with my 2 kids. So that's something I see us continuing to offer going forward. Let people be able to access what's becoming really a necessity in life, as we've seen over the past year. There are some jobs you can't apply to without getting online and filling out an application. You can't apply for unemployment without getting online. Over the past year, many of us could not work without internet access. So I think something that's going to become more and more important, not just in the public library, but in our community, to be able to offer connectivity throughout our city.
Chris, is it okay if I chime in there?
Oh, yeah, surely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw a little bit of data out there to really emphasize the importance of Heather's work in the libraries and getting devices to people. In Fayette County in the last year, only about 74% of people accessed the internet via a computer. So that leaves 26% of people not accessing with a computer, and then 84% with a cell phone, which still is a huge chunk of the population that isn't accessing with a cell phone. And we know we don't get the same functionality on cell phones that we do on computers. So that digital divide, getting devices to people, providing internet access is so incredibly important. And I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing there.
And Heather also mentioned, and thank you, Lauren. Heather, you mentioned maybe not a positive, well, maybe perhaps a positive aspect, a lesson learned from the impacts of the pandemic that we might be able to carry forward. Sharon, do you see that perhaps also in learning? You know, you guys do my son, fortunately, my young son was able to go back to school for the first time today. And as you know, we have kids all going over the community, but he had his Chromebook in his backpack, even though he'll be in the classroom. Sharon, what are some of your thoughts in regards to digital access that we'll take away from the pandemic going forward?
So digital access, you know, I echo what everybody else has said. The digital divide, you know, that has been one of the things that has just been out front and center, because in the midst of the pandemic, when we were trying to assist folks, if we had to, of course, go virtual. And so there were challenges out there with people being able to get assistance, you know, because they did not have access, internet access or device access. And so even with our Head Start children, once we went virtual and child development centers were shut down by the state of Kentucky, you know, how do we communicate with our families if they don't have internet access or they don't have the device? And so luckily through our Head Start program, we were able to get devices, you know, out to as many families as we could so that we could communicate with them and continue to keep that linkage going. That was tough because guess what? Everybody across the nation was ordering these devices. And so we had to wait and be patient. And so that was the digital divide. I think that's going to be something that everybody, you know, we've learned a lesson here. You know, it's not just that those that have can and those that don't, but it affects everybody in the community and it can keep you stagnant. But I do think that going forward, we've also learned some lessons here that when we can do things virtually, You know, it does make some things easier. It speeds some things up, you know, as far as getting signatures, the exchange of paperwork and all of that. And so I believe that going forward, we're going to see at Community Action Council that we're going to be able to use electronics in a different way than we have before to provide services to people. Instead of having to make an appointment to come into a location to receive services, you'll make an appointment and you'll be at your home, or you might be at your job on your break. You know, you might not have to get transportation if you don't have transportation, you know, to get to one of our locations. You'll be able to do this digitally. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of that carryover going forward in all of the services that we do. Now, honestly, for our children in our Head Start program, we know that children learn best age 0 to 5 hands-on. And so we want to get those children back in the classrooms, and we've been operating at half capacity, but we'll be going back full capacity on April 5th, because we know that we were so glad to hear that the ratios in the state were going up. We received the notification yesterday, so we were really happy about that. But we also know that parents can't get back to work if they don't have high quality early childhood education, you know, for their children. And so, you know, Head Start is going to be pivotal in getting the economy moving again for low and moderate income families, because they have to have a safe place for their child to go in order for them to return back to work or return back to school or return to something that seems a little bit normal.
Thank you, Sharon. We're going to now turn to a question that was posed from our audience. And the question goes to Christine and Seedleaf. The question is, has Seedleaf been providing home delivered meals during the pandemic? Christine, you're muted.
No, we do not deliver home delivered meals. There are a few services that do that, although I think they come with a cost. Your best bet to get meals, and you can get meals in multiples, you know, depending on if you have a large family. We do work with Food Chain that does daily, they give out daily meals that you can bring back home to your family, but we don't do home food delivery.
I can add, we are offering shelf staple meals through a partnership with God's Pantry at our village and or site branches for children. So if anyone needs help, that's another way they can get it.
Okay, and so Community Action has partnered with other people in the community too. And I'm not sure the exact intent behind that question, but we have been providing home delivered hot meals to seniors throughout the entire pandemic. So if that question came from someone in the senior realm, they'll just need to contact Community Action Council, and you know, we can help get them on the list, and also help work with them through God's Pantry to get food that they may need for their homes.
Thank you everyone for those responses and insights. Lauren, I want to turn the conversation, the next question to you, and maybe shift our remaining moments to talking about what we've learned from the pandemic and how that will impact our services going forward. In your opinion, how do you feel that the socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic will shape local planning strategies in the future? Because the impacts have been unlike anything we've ever seen before. Are you guys seeing, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge question. So first of all, this last year has been really revealing, and like I think I mentioned already, a lot of the issues that have been exacerbated are things that we already knew about. I would encourage everybody to check out our comprehensive plan, and in particular, check out the implementation items table. There are so many things that are highlighted in the comprehensive plan that just become even more important as we see food insecurity grow, and as we see housing become more challenging, and as we continue to see these problems exacerbated. So, for example, some things that I think are even more important to move forward than they already were include updating regulations, for example, to redefine how we conceptualize and require open spaces. We've seen a lot of people using parks, and we've also seen a lot of people who don't have access to parks and can't get out and use that space. Transportation becomes a very, very important topic, even more so as well. Of course, we have transit here, we have public transit, we have bicycle facilities, but increasing the prevalence of those facilities and adjusting for the times is also important. If you don't feel comfortable getting on a bus, do you feel comfortable using the sidewalk? We just recently updated the sidewalk ordinance to require wider sidewalks with new development so people can use that. There's a Nicholasville corridor study ongoing right now that's looking for ways to make transit more open to more modes of life, whether it's a single-use car or a bus transportation or a bike or walking. These things are all really important when we consider the cost of a vehicle and how much that can put a burden on a family that is struggling already. We also have things like ADUs or accessory dwelling units that can help with housing. So how do we get denser, sustainable housing to help meet the needs of housing demand in our community, where we know people are facing eviction and homelessness is a constant challenge? The Hope Center does incredible work in our community, and they've been adapting to expand the amount of people that they can house by using spaces that they wouldn't normally have people sleeping in, so that they are distanced. There's so much more. That's really just a start. But the socioeconomic challenges are very important to think about. And we're about a year now from, I guess like a year in this like pandemic living. And it's going to be a longer road to recovery. And I think the more quickly we can realize that and continue to build these relationships with incredible organizations like Community Action Council and Seedleaf and the libraries and the Hope Center, the better. So I would also in that stroke encourage anybody, if there's something that we can do in planning from a regulation perspective or a policy perspective to enable you guys to be even more successful, please reach out to us and let us know.
And Lauren,
oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ford. I just wanted to add on about the issue of transportation. In Lexington, it is incredibly difficult if you're using public transit to get from point A to point B, especially because the way that the routes are laid out. Many people either need to transfer, which means they'll either wait a really long time, or they take one bus and walk it the rest of the way. So we've had, because we have programs that reach out to many folks in the neighborhoods that we serve, they usually don't have a car. If they're adults, they don't have a bicycle, or if they do, the bike route just to one of our garden spaces or wherever we're having an educational program, it's just not safe. Or, we have, like yesterday, I had a young man who was in our high school program who took the bus. He's coming from Georgetown, but it took him almost an hour to get in from Georgetown Street Corridor to get to 4th and Elm Tree Lane. Took him like an hour bus ride because he had to walk 20 minutes. And I have to implore we have to do something where we have more or faster bus routes or bus routes that are more efficient, but also that we have sidewalks and bicycle lanes where children, especially our young people, if they need to, they can ride their bike without have to worry about traffic and getting hit or different accidents. So that's really a point where we struggle with our adults and with our young people. Sometimes I give rides to people who are in our classes to get back home just to make sure that they can make it and have access to the different educational programs that we offer. And during a pandemic, that's a bit difficult to do, obviously, but it's, we have to weigh that risk. And so it's something that I think would really be helpful for all of our organizations, the library, CAC, and for Seedleaf on this call.
Yeah, is it okay if I add one more thing onto there, Commissioner Ford? Yeah, Christine, I agree 120% at least. And to throw that number home, like if we just look at renters, about 15% of renters don't have a vehicle. That's a huge amount of our population when we consider that about half of our population in Lexington is renting. Moreover, vehicles are really, really expensive. They're one of the largest costs that individuals have. So another little bit of data there is almost half of our renters and about 20% of our owners have housing costs that are not sustainable. And a quarter of our renters have housing costs that are 50% or more of their income. Like 50% or more of your income, that is not sustainable. And then if you're also required to have a vehicle to get to your basic needs, it's just not sustainable. So I wholeheartedly agree that anything that we can do to increase multimodal infrastructure to get people where they need to be, so they don't have to have a vehicle even, but they can get to where they need to be without a huge burden or a full day to get there. It's critical.
No, these are all great points, and I think that it really talks about the needs that are still there. Transportation being a barrier for some, and then not everyone has access to the digital technology, and so making sure that we don't leave those folks in our community behind. I'm going to just pose a question, well, maybe a two-part question to the entire panel, and whoever feels comfortable can kind of jump in. We'd be remiss if we didn't discuss resources. You know, in our network, our organizations and our leaders are very skilled with doing more with less, and we're very resourceful. But what resources are needed most now during this relief phase? And then also consider this, how can we ensure that during the recovery phase, there's going to be, we're seeing it now, and we anticipate additional federal and state resources being available. How can we ensure that those resources are managed effectively and stewarded in a way to produce real outcomes for those most in need? So basically what I'm saying, what are the needs right now in you guys' perspectives? And then when resources do become available, how do you plan, as Heather mentioned earlier, how do you plan to pivot, plan, and put those resources where they can best be used?
So Chris, what we're seeing right now, we've already talked about this. Right now, current housing stabilization is #1 on the list. Hands down, it's #1. But when you start thinking about moving forward post-COVID, I think one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at and allocate resources for retraining, skills training and development, and in those critical areas where people will be able to get back to work. For an example, we know that Fayette County Public Schools right now at this very moment is having transportation issues. And so we need to make sure that we have programmings, and this is actually another partnership that we have with the city, is where we have a CDL training program as part of our economic job development programs here at Community Action. So having more training programs like that have a quicker turnaround time so that people can go through the training and it won't take them 6, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, so that they can obtain a skill and be job ready relatively quickly. I think that that's going to be the key, getting people with some new skills in jobs that are available right now and jobs that are paying relatively, decent wages. As far as transportation, because with the CDL license, you may be able to go work for the city. There's a driver shortage there. You may be able to work for Fayette County Public Schools. There's a driver shortage there. Pepsi, Big Rig, anything like that. But I think that we're going to need to look and allocate resources to getting people trained or retrained in some of those, and so that they have some of the skills for jobs that are going to be available right now, getting people back into the workforce, and whatever that looks like, whether it's job training, of course, we know that it's going to be childcare, all of those things, but getting people in a position where they are able to start moving past COVID and getting back into the normal routine of self-sufficiency. Does that make sense to you, Chris?
It does. Are there any additional additional thoughts, Christine?
I want to add that I think what would be really important going forward when we think about our local food system and what Seedleaf is trying to do is to think about ways that urban land, unused urban land, could be offered to local growers to, strengthen our local food system. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a cadre of market gardeners. These are people, adults who have full-time jobs, and they decided that they want to do small-scale farming part-time to earn additional income. And the biggest barrier that they face, and once they're done with our program, once they've had their first year of practicing selling to local restaurants and community organizations into the farmers market, is that land is not available. The price of land for agriculture is way above and beyond what most of the people that we work have access to. And they also live in urban spaces. They can't go out into the middle of, Woodford County or wherever to set up a farm. They have to be able to do it within the city. So thinking about the land the city has access to, and thinking about creative ways to open that up to agriculture and to local growers who can productively use that and turn that into not only an economic opportunity, but as a way of making sure that local food is available in Fayette County, hyper-local, meaning from our neighborhood and from our community. So thinking creatively about land usage and how we designate land and how we make it available to growers, such as some of the that we work with.
Chris, I think it's going to also be necessary to go back and reach back for the youth, right? And look at what kind of programming and opportunities we're going to have for youth. Because in many low income and moderately income homes, the youth having summer jobs or some other job that brings additional income into that home and help support that family in a way that's necessary. I think we're going to need to look at some of that. And then apply some resources. If we're talking about moving forward, apply some resources that are going to help the youth, because we know that during COVID, we had a rash of youth violence going on in the community. And I think we're going to strengthen the community for everybody post-COVID, or just anytime in general. I think that we have to have opportunities for the youth, because if we don't have something for them to do that's positive and forward directing, they'll find something else to do that might not be so positive. So I think, investing in the youth going forward, I think you have to look at that entire family. So you're looking at the children with Head Start and trying to get them in the services, and the schools are reopening. We're talking about families and giving them the support that they need. The youth, I think we have to look at that whole dynamic to help people move forward. I don't think that we can do it in bits and pieces in isolation of each other.
We've been looking a lot at the educational impact of the pandemic on our kids. Like I mentioned, I'm the mom of 2 kids. One has done pretty well with virtual learning. One has really, really struggled. And I know that there are a lot of kids out there like him. And so we've been looking at how our resources are distributed to help kids in different age groups. We've been very, very strong in the past in early childhood, and that's been a big focus of ours. And one thing we're going to be looking at is how can we provide comparable services to older children, school-age children, and really be able to offer equitable services to everyone across our city. There are a lot of families who won't be able to afford an after-school tutor to help their kids get catched up if they got behind during the pandemic. So one thing we're going to be doing is hiring a director of education, and I'm going to put in a plug. That position actually closes today. And this person is going to help set a strategic direction for education in the Lexington Public Library. They're going to be looking at our response to the pandemic surrounding education, any social emotional issues that have come up that we can do programming to help address, help with workforce development, whether that's helping people apply for jobs or build resumes, or helping entrepreneurs get their businesses started or expand their business. So that's going to be education and workforce development is going to be a major area of emphasis for us over the coming year. And if you are out there in the community and you're interested in helping with this and you have an educational background, get on our website and apply today.
That's great news. I think that resource would really be helpful, and I would imagine that our partners at our local school systems would really applaud that that effort and what it will bring. As we go into the closing moments of this panel discussion, I have an interesting question from our Q&A chat box. Lexington is growing more multicultural by the day. And for those that may have language or other cultural barriers, you can just even prior to the pandemic, you can just imagine how their challenges are faced. The question is, what collaborations or resources exist for our immigrant or refugee communities here in Lexington? Does anybody want to speak to that? Christine?
I'll chime in really briefly. So Seedleaf has recognized, I mean, it's been apparent to me since I moved here to Lexington in 2008, that even though the history of the city seems to be very sort of concentrated between Black and white, I was meeting French Congolese migrants. I was meeting or seeing lots of Latinx folks who were here, who had moved here. And so Seedleaf has done a few things in the past year to make sure that we reach out to those folks. We have worked to get a person on staff who reaches out specifically to the Latinx community, and we partner with Casa de la Cultura, which is a great organization, as well as we try to have information going out to the public about our gardens through Radio Lex, which has a Spanish language station that people can tune into and listen to. It's a community radio station that's available here in Lexington. Also, we're working to get out educational materials that are trilingual, so that are in French and Spanish, because we find that for a lot of the kids that we work with, you know, we'll say something to the kids and the kids will understand, but then there's like this burden of expecting them to go home and explain to their parents or translate for their parents what they learned and what they have to do, and have their parents help them, right? And so having resources that are in multiple languages so that parents and children can be on the same page is something that we're working toward. But immediately, for more resources that are available that reach out to different groups, I would say Casa de la Cultura is a really great organization, and Radio Lex's Spanish language outreach station.
Thank you, Christine. Planning. You know, I'm going to pose this question to Lauren. And again, we want to thank our panel, Community Action Council, Lexington Public Library, Seedleaf. To our viewing audience, please trust me that these are just a few of the many committed community organizations, a really good reflection thereof. And Lexington is very fortunate to have these resources and partnerships available. But planning indicates engagement, Lauren. You know, we down here at City Hall on the downtown campus, we don't go about this work in an isolated fashion. We don't wave a magic wand. What must we do to ensure, even during a pandemic environment, that there are opportunities for community engagement and input to inform our planning efforts? And that also can go to Lauren or any of our panelists as well. Lauren, what are your thoughts about the value of engagement and input?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that one. Engagement is absolutely critical. The more isolated we are as planners or as members of the public, the less effective we're going to be as a community. It can be really challenging to engage with planning processes as a member of the public. And that's something that we in planning recognize. And we've been working to help to bridge that gap. So something that if somebody's looking to get involved in planning processes specifically, there's a public engagement toolkit that I highly recommend. It breaks down some of the basics about how the development process works and ways which members of the public can engage. That said, it can be really challenging to engage even if you know how to engage. Getting to the location, standing in front of a commission, talking to council. These are really, really intimidating and challenging things. So I think that it's critical that we look for representative feedback. when we're seeking to develop, and understand that the voices who are in the room or on the virtual Zoom meeting, which all of the planning processes are on Zoom now, so you can find that information on the Lexington government's calendar. But that really requires a lot of members of the public to be paying attention, and a lot of them aren't necessarily even getting the notifications. If they're renters, for example, they're not being directly notified of development changes. So I think it's really important that we in planning and members of the Planning Commission and of council look for representative indications of what's going on in an area when we're making decisions and providing guidance. One thing that might be helpful to that regard, there's a set of infographics on Imagine Lexington's website that are broken down by council district and the service areas that have just loads of information on there about like, what is the demographic makeup, how many people are below the poverty level in this area. And I think those are really important for us to look at, because if we're looking at a development that isn't to the benefit of the greater community, we need to really consider that as compassionate humans that want our community to be healthy, and recognize that the community cannot be healthy if a section of our public is marginalized and doesn't have access to basic resources and basic needs. Everybody has to sleep somewhere, right? Like, everybody has to sleep somewhere. And so as we look at development and housing, we have to remember that what is affordable, what defines affordable, how do we keep infrastructural costs low, how do we provide access to the services that people need. I think I might be rambling now, but there's just so much to say on that topic. So if you are looking, if you're watching this webinar and you're looking to be more engaged with planning processes, definitely check out that public engagement toolkit, and know that us in long range planning and planning staff absolutely want you to be engaged and feel like you can be engaged. And if there are some barriers that we can remove, we want to do that because it's important.
Well, Lauren, we thank you and the planning team. This webinar, I think, is an example and an indication of LFUCG's planning's intentionality on making sure we keep folks engaged. We are winding down to the hour on our Mornings with Planning webinar. Again, I want to thank our panelists. I'm going to go very quickly around, ask you guys for any closing thoughts, or I asked you earlier what led you here. If there's one thing that you've observed from your team, social services and human services, we don't do this by ourselves. We all are very fortunate to work with great teams. What have your team done that just has reaffirmed to you that we're going to make it out of this pandemic? If you can incorporate that in your closing thoughts, we'll just go around real quick with Christine.
Thank you for having me. I do want to say really quickly, a great organization to follow is Civic Lex, and they send out notifications on when different government events happen, so that the public can stay abreast of that. And one great thing that our team has done, I believe right now in a greenhouse, we have 5,000 seedlings growing, getting ready for a spring plant sale. And if you're a gardener, just seeing that spring green and seeing all these little plant babies come up, you just become hopeful that, you know, as time passes, things will change and hopefully get better. So that's that we planted all of those things and that they're growing and getting ready to go out the door is what gives me hope going forward.
Outstanding. Thank you, Christine. And Heather, 30 seconds, and then Sharon, 30 seconds, and then we'll close out.
I think the thing that's most impressed me about the team that I'm working with is just their resourcefulness and creativity over the past year. I think we have rolled out more new services and in the past year, in the past 12 months than we have in the past 12 years. It's just been so exciting. Things that we thought maybe we'll try this before the pandemic. We got to go in and we got it out, and it's working and really impactful in the community. So I'm really, really lucky to have such a great team here at the library.
Thanks, Heather. Sharon?
One of the things, Chris, that has impressed me most about my team is their resilience. and their dedication to the community. I always knew they were dedicated, right? But in the midst of a pandemic, when you see people going above and beyond, and when everybody else is going home, that your team is staying here and their boots on the ground and they're giving, doing mass food distribution, and they're making sure that people have electricity in their homes and caring for all of the different needs that came up during the midst of the pandemic. I have just, sat back and watched them, and I've been so thankful and so grateful and humbled to be able to work with such dedicated community people that just want to help people, And so when I look at my team, we've been exhausted. I'm going to tell you, we've been tired, but it makes my heart smile to see a group of people that are in it for everybody else and not worried about it for themselves.
Outstanding. Well, we thank each and every one of you for joining our panel. Lauren, thank you for having me as your moderator, and I'll turn it over to you to quickly close us out this morning.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me find my notes right here. Okay, so if you have any questions that we didn't discuss today from the audience, do consider reaching out, whether it's to us in planning or one of the members on this panel or somebody else in the community. We want you to reach out. There will be a survey sent out after this webinar to participants. We've been doing this webinar series for, I think this is our 7th webinar, so we'd really love feedback. It's been one of our efforts to continue to engage with the public while we can't be physically with people, so let us know how we're doing. It's been a great conversation today, and I just want to again thank all of our panelists and especially Commissioner Ford. Thank you so much for moderating this. I'd also like to thank Chris Woodall for coordination and Valerie Friedman, who's been dropping these links in our chat box, and Libby Jefferson, our newest long-range planning team member, for stellar technical support. And of course, thank you to our audience who has been here today. Let's see, the Mornings with Planning webinar series will continue to discuss new ways to reconnect, reimagine, and respond in a new reality, and we want to hear from you. What topics should we discuss as we move Lexington forward together? You can email us at imagine@lexingtonky.gov. We will be back on the first Wednesday of next month, April 7th. For more information on future sessions, to access the recording from this webinar, and to learn more about planning in Lexington, visit imaginelexington.com or lexingtonky.gov/planning and follow us on social media. Thank you for spending your morning with us, and we'll see you next time.